Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care.
The planet Arinya was unlike any place Liam Drake had ever visited. He had traveled across countless star systems, studied life forms that only a handful of other humans had seen, and yet, the dense forests of Arinya were a mystery. It was a world shrouded in mist and silence, with bioluminescent plants that lit the dense undergrowth in shades of blue and green. As Liam stepped carefully through the brush, his gaze flickered between the glowing foliage and his scanner. The Noralians, Arinya's native species, were a reclusive race rarely glimpsed by outsiders. Stories about them circulated in scientific communities, rumors that painted them as fierce hunters who viewed humans with fear and disdain. According to these tales, Noralians believed humans were dangerous, primitive creatures who would consume anything weaker than them. The lack of concrete information fascinated Liam. He was determined to learn the truth about these enigmatic beings. "Just a few more samples," he muttered, securing a vibrant, alien fern into a specimen bag. Then the silence broke. A rustle in the trees above caught his attention, and Liam looked up. There, crouched on a thick branch, was a figure tall, slender, her silhouette outlined by the luminescent plants around her. She moved gracefully, her movements as quiet as the leaves that whispered with her passing. A Noralian. She watched him. Her amber eyes narrowed with intense focus. Her skin held a soft silver hue, blending almost seamlessly with her surroundings, and her hair flowed down her shoulders in tendrils that shifted in the faint breeze like liquid metal. She was armed with a curved, alien blade that caught the light as she raised it, and her stance suggested she was prepared to fight or flee. Liam held up his hands in a gesture of peace, his heart pounding. "I'm not here to harm you," he said softly, though he doubted she would understand his words. The Noralian woman's eyes widened at the sound of his voice, her expression a mixture of shock and suspicion. She responded in her own language, her voice low and melodic, though her words held a harsh edge that hinted at mistrust. It was then that Liam realized the depth of the misunderstanding. To her, he was a threat, a creature who might just devour her if she let her guard down. He thought quickly, reaching into his pack. He pulled out a nutrient bar, a small, innocuous item he often used as a quick snack during his excursions. Slowly, he held it out to her, hoping to communicate his intentions through a simple gesture. The Noralian woman stared at the offering, her expression shifting from suspicion to confusion. She muttered something under her breath, and Liam could see the wariness in her eyes flicker, as if she was unsure how to react. To her, the act of sharing food might mean something profound or something trivial, but he could only hope it would convey goodwill. Finally, she accepted the bar, her gaze never leaving his as she took a tentative bite. As the taste registered, her tense posture relaxed, and she spoke again, this time with a softer tone. Her initial fear seemed to lessen, replaced by a curiosity Liam hadn't expected. He couldn't understand her words, but he could feel the change in her demeanor, a shift from predator and prey to something more neutral, even respectful. As the first taste of trust blossomed between them, Liam smiled, hoping it would be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. Klara, huntress of the Noralian tribes, had always been taught to fear the outsiders. Humans were beings of ruthless appetite, creatures who would take anything they desired and leave devastation in their wake. This was what she had believed since childhood. Yet here she was, sitting across from one, chewing on a peculiar offering he had given her, small, sweet, and unexpectedly nourishing. Her amber eyes never left the human, observing him with a blend of curiosity and wariness. She noted the way he lowered his gaze and kept his movements slow and deliberate. If she didn't know better, she might have thought he was imitating the Noralian gesture of submission, a way to show that he meant no harm. This confused her, an outsider showing humility. "What game is this?" she asked in her native tongue, the words laced with suspicion. Of course, the human Liam, as she would later come to know him, did not understand her question, but he offered a slight smile, a warm expression that seemed oddly genuine, as though he sensed the weight of her doubt. Liam extended his hand toward her in an open gesture, palm up, a universal sign of openness he hoped would translate well. Kaylare's eyes flickered to his hand, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. Such a gesture was common in her culture too, yet it was reserved for close kin or trusted allies, not strangers. She wondered if the outsider knew the significance of what he was doing. "What are you trying to tell me?" she muttered, more to herself than to him. He responded with an unintelligible string of words, his tone gentle and soft. The sound of his voice wasn't harsh or forceful. It was soothing. She found herself relaxing, a reaction she didn't entirely trust. Liam saw her hesitant movements and could tell she was caught between two instincts, the desire to run and the curiosity to stay. Deciding to try a different approach, he removed his gear and sat cross-legged on the mossy ground, making himself as non-threatening as possible. As he settled, Kaylare couldn't help but let out a small huff of amusement. In her world, warriors were never so defenseless, yet this human made himself vulnerable with an ease that bordered on foolishness. She lowered herself into a crouch, her blade still in hand but held loosely. "You are strange, outsider," she said, her words carrying a hint of a smile. "Perhaps not as monstrous as the elders say." In response, Liam tilted his head, intrigued by the softness in her tone. He could sense the walls between them beginning to thin, even if only slightly. He gestured to himself, pressing a hand over his heart. "Liam," he said slowly. Kaylare blinked, watching him with sharp eyes, then pointed at herself with her free hand. "Kaylare." Liam's face lit up with understanding. "Kaylare," he repeated, careful to mimic her pronunciation. His accent was strange, yet the way he spoke her name carried a certain reverence that made her feel seen. For a while, they sat in silence, each watching the other with growing interest. Despite the barriers of language and culture, they shared a moment of understanding. Liam found himself wondering what her world looked like through her eyes, and Kaylare, for the first time, felt a flicker of doubt about everything she'd been taught about humans. Her curiosity got the better of her. She leaned forward, touching a band on his wrist, a piece of his exploration equipment. It blinked with a small light, and she recoiled slightly, unaccustomed to such technology. Liam chuckled and, seeing her interest, held out the device for her to inspect. Tentatively, she accepted it, examining the smooth surface. The Noralian people relied on the natural world for everything. Machines like this felt foreign, almost magical. Still, the humans shared it with her without hesitation, as though they were already allies rather than strangers. Perhaps, Kaylare thought, this one is different. Hours had passed since their first cautious exchange, and Liam found himself captivated by Kaylare's presence. She was unlike any creature he had encountered, possessing a strength and grace that seemed intrinsic to her very being. Her movements were deliberate, each glance measured. He felt as though he were being scrutinized by someone who could see through him as easily as she could the mist of her world. Kaylare, meanwhile, remained guarded, though her curiosity kept her from leaving. She observed how the human took his time, admiring her world without the arrogance she'd expected from an outsider. He paused to inspect a cluster of luminous flowers, their blue light reflecting in his eyes as he examined them with fascination. She couldn't help but wonder if his admiration was genuine. Liam sensed her watching him, and with a gentle smile, he gestured to the flowers. He knew she wouldn't understand his words, but he spoke anyway, hoping his tone would communicate his respect. "Your world, it's beautiful," he murmured, his voice reverent. Kaylare raised an eyebrow, but there was a softening in her expression, a flicker of appreciation that surprised her. She hadn't expected a human to look at her world with such awe. She knelt beside him, reaching out to touch the flowers with delicate fingers. "These are called Talara blossoms," she said softly, knowing he wouldn't understand, but feeling compelled to share. "They guide our paths at night, lighting the way for travelers." To her surprise, he didn't reach out to pluck one, as she might have expected. Instead, he merely admired them, his face alight with fascination. A small smile tugged at her lips, And for the first time, KLRA felt something besides suspicion in his presence, a sense of kinship, or perhaps simply the feeling that this human might not be the monster she had imagined. They continued exploring together, KLRA guiding him through the forest as she pointed out plants, trees, and creatures that made up the world of Arinya. Though he couldn't understand her words, he listened intently, nodding at her explanations as though they were old friends sharing stories rather than strangers from different worlds. Their companionship, however, was soon tested. The shriek of a wild creature split the air, echoing through the forest and sending flocks of small, glowing birds scattering into the sky. KLRA's eyes snapped to the source of the sound, her body instinctively shifting into a defensive stance. Liam's hand moved to his side, where he carried a compact weapon meant for emergencies. Though he was no warrior, he wasn't completely defenseless. But before he could draw it, KLRA's hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Stay low," she hissed, gesturing for him to follow her lead. He didn't understand her words, but her intent was clear. Together, they crouched behind a fallen tree, watching as a hulking, shadowed figure moved through the trees. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and its snarls echoed through the forest, each sound vibrating through the air. KLRA glanced at Liam, motioning for him to stay put. Despite her initial fears, she had no intention of letting harm come to him. He had shown her kindness, and for that, she would repay him. Drawing her blade, she moved in silence, her every step controlled and purposeful. Liam watched in awe as she slipped through the shadows, her form nearly invisible against the dense forest. She was a hunter in her element, moving with the kind of precision he'd only ever seen in predators. The creature lunged at her, its massive jaws snapping inches from her shoulder. But KLRA was faster. With a graceful twist, she dodged its attack, delivering a swift, calculated strike with her blade. The beast roared in pain, thrashing as she maintained her ground, her stance steady and unyielding. Liam, caught between awe and worry, knew he couldn't just watch. Ignoring KLRA's earlier warning, he scanned his surroundings and picked up a sharp stone. He hurled it at the creature's head, distracting it just long enough for KLRA to deliver a decisive blow. The creature collapsed, its form going limp as silence returned to the forest. Breathless, KLRA turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and anger. She marched over to him, her jaw clenched as she spoke in her native tongue, her words sharp and reproachful. Liam understood her meaning without needing to know the language. She was furious that he had intervened, putting himself in danger. But he simply met her gaze, a defiant smile tugging at his lips. With a sigh, KLRA relented, her frustration giving way to something softer. She shook her head, muttering something under her breath, but her eyes held a glimmer of respect. They returned to the path, neither speaking, but something between them had changed. Liam had seen KLRA's strength, her skill as a warrior, and KLRA had seen Liam's bravery. Reckless as it was, they walked in silence, their bond deepening with each step, and for the first time, KLRA allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she had misjudged him. The forest grew quieter as evening descended, casting long shadows across the trail. After the close encounter with the creature, Liam felt a growing respect for KLRA and her connection to her world. She moved through the forest as though she were part of it, each step confident, every movement precise. She was a guardian of this place, and he, an outsider, was lucky to be in her presence. KLRA paused near a small clearing, where the trees opened up to reveal a view of the distant mountains bathed in the pale glow of Arinya's twin moons. She gestured for him to sit beside her, settling down herself as she took in the serene landscape. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with an unspoken understanding. Liam took a breath, glancing at KLRA before speaking softly. "Earth," he said, placing a hand over his chest. "My home." He gestured upwards, hoping she would understand that his world was beyond the stars, distant yet as real to him as Arinya was to her. KLRA watched him, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. She hesitated, then pointed to herself. "Noralia," she said, her voice carrying a sense of pride. She drew her hand through the air, tracing an invisible line to the horizon, as if mapping her home within the cosmos. A small, genuine smile spread across Liam's face. "Noralia," he repeated, trying to mimic the elegance in her pronunciation. She nodded, a faint smile gracing her own lips in return. For a while, they sat in silence, content to simply be in each other's company. The gentle chirping of night creatures filled the air, blending with the distant rustling of leaves. Liam could sense that this moment was something sacred for Kaylara, a quiet communion with her world, and he respected it, choosing to absorb the beauty around them in his own way. After a few minutes, Kaylara leaned toward him, her gaze thoughtful. She touched a claw-like mark on her upper arm, tracing it as if recalling a memory. Her voice was soft as she spoke, though Liam couldn't understand her words. However, her expression told him enough. This was a mark of survival, a story of struggle and resilience. In response, Liam rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faint scar along his forearm, a remnant from an exploration mission gone awry years ago. He pointed to it, and then to himself, shrugging with a faint smile. They shared a look of mutual respect, recognizing each other's experiences even without a shared language. Emboldened, Kaylara motioned toward the small band on Liam's wrist, the device he had shown her earlier. Intrigued, she leaned closer, her eyes alight with curiosity. Liam unfastened it, placing it in her hands. Kaylara studied the device, turning it over in her fingers as if trying to unlock its secrets. She muttered something to herself, a mix of curiosity and awe, and Liam couldn't help but chuckle at her fascination. Deciding to give her a demonstration, he tapped a button on the band, activating a small hologram. A three-dimensional map of the stars appeared, floating above Kaylara's hands. She gasped, her eyes wide as she watched the stars shimmer and move. Her fingers traced the holographic stars in wonder, her expression a mix of awe and joy. "Beautiful," she murmured, glancing at him as though seeing him in a new light. Liam grinned, pleased to share something from his world with her. As they watched the hologram together, Kaylara found herself drawn to the human's warmth, his openness, his willingness to share pieces of his life with her. He was unlike any creature she had ever known, and against her initial judgment, she felt a tug of admiration for him. After the hologram faded, Kaylara turned to him with a question in her eyes, gesturing to herself and then to the stars, as if asking what lay beyond Arinya. Liam understood her meaning and began to speak, weaving together stories of Earth, its vast oceans, towering cities, and countless cultures. Though his words meant little to her, his enthusiasm and expression conveyed a message of wonder and respect for his world. Kaylara listened, entranced, her mind drifting as she imagined a place so different from her own. She wondered what it would be like to walk among Earth's landscapes, to experience the marvels he described. For the first time, she felt a genuine curiosity about the world beyond her planet and a desire to know more. Finally, Liam placed a hand over his heart, bowing his head in a gesture of respect. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft, hoping his gratitude would reach her even if the words did not. Kaylara mirrored his gesture, placing a hand over her own heart in response, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that needed no translation. In that moment, they were no longer alien to each other, but two souls sharing a fleeting, profound connection under the starlit sky. The peace of the night didn't last long. As the early hours of dawn began to light the sky, Kaylara suddenly grew tense, her senses on high alert. Liam noticed her change in posture, his instincts kicking in as he followed her gaze. In the distance, a low rumbling sound grew louder, approaching with ominous speed. Kaylara motioned for him to hide behind a large rock. She pressed a finger to her lips, indicating silence, her eyes full of urgency. Liam crouched behind her, trying to remain as still as possible. A group of Noralian warriors emerged from the shadows, their armor gleaming under the first light of day. They moved with military precision, their eyes scanning the area. At their head was a figure Liam hadn't seen before, a tall, imposing Noralian male with a gaze that radiated authority. He barked a command in their language, and the warriors spread out, combing the area as though searching for something. Kalare stiffened, her face a mask of controlled fear. She turned to Liam, her eyes pleading, and gestured for him to stay hidden. It was clear that these warriors would not respond kindly to the presence of an outsider, especially not one from a race they perceived as dangerous. But Liam understood the risk was not his alone. Kalare was also in danger if they found out she had been with him. He gave her a reassuring nod, silently promising to stay hidden. Kalare looked relieved, but her focus quickly returned to the approaching warriors. The lead Noralian, whose rank was marked by intricate silver insignia on his armor, stepped closer, his voice sharp as he spoke to Kalare. Though Liam couldn't understand the language, he could tell the warrior was questioning her. She responded with short, clipped answers, her tone respectful yet firm. Liam held his breath, hoping the warriors would move on. But then, one of them spotted a faint footprint in the dirt, the impression of a human boot. The warrior pointed it out to the leader, who narrowed his eyes and looked back at Kalare, his expression darkening. His voice rose, demanding an explanation, his suspicion clear. Kalare's gaze flickered to where Liam was hiding, and for a moment, he thought she might give him away. But instead, she took a step forward, addressing the leader with a defiant tone that took Liam by surprise. Her words were strong, full of conviction, as though she were defending something sacred. The lead warrior glared at her, but she held her ground, refusing to back down. Her stance was unwavering, her loyalty to him somehow more powerful than her fear of her own people. Liam felt a surge of gratitude and respect for Kalare. She was risking everything for him, choosing trust over tradition. Finally, the warrior gave a curt nod and ordered his soldiers to fall back, though he shot Kalare a final, suspicious look before leaving. The group moved on, their figures disappearing into the forest as the tension in the air gradually lifted. As soon as they were out of sight, Liam emerged from his hiding spot, his heart still pounding. Kalare looked at him, her face a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. For a moment, they simply stood there, the weight of what had just happened settling between them. Liam didn't know how to thank her, but he placed a hand on his chest and nodded, his eyes full of gratitude. Kalare returned the gesture, though her expression was somber. She knew that by protecting him, she had crossed a line that could never be undone. They continued walking, but this time, the silence between them was heavy. Kalare was quiet, lost in thought, and Liam could sense the internal conflict she was grappling with. She had chosen him over her people, a decision that could have serious consequences. Finally, they stopped near a small river, the water clear and reflecting the early morning light. Kalare sat down by the riverbank, her gaze distant as she stared at the water. Liam joined her, understanding that she needed this moment of stillness to gather her thoughts. After a long pause, Kalare spoke, her voice soft and almost vulnerable. Though he couldn't understand her words, Liam sensed she was sharing something deeply personal, a confession of sorts. He watched her, listening intently, hoping that his presence would convey his support. As she spoke, Kalare looked at him, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. Her words slowed, and though she knew he couldn't understand, she felt the need to speak openly, to express the turmoil within her heart. She had grown up with stories of humans as enemies, yet here was a human who had shown her kindness, loyalty, and even bravery. She didn't know how to reconcile her beliefs with her feelings. In response, Liam reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. She looked down at their hands, surprised by the warmth of his touch, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to feel the comfort he offered, a silent promise that he was here with her, despite the odds. For a long time, they sat together by the river, two souls bound by a connection that transcended words. In that moment, Kalare allowed herself to believe that perhaps the path she had chosen was the right one. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, She was content to walk it alongside Liam. The sunlight filtering through the canopy above cast dappled patterns on the forest floor as Liam and KLRA walked in silence. The weight of KLRA's decision to protect him had settled heavily between them, filling the space with an unspoken tension and intimacy. Liam knew the risk she'd taken, and he wanted to honor that choice, to show her that her trust in him was well placed. They soon reached a secluded clearing, surrounded by tall, flowering plants with blossoms that shimmered like glass. KLRA gestured for them to stop, settling down in the soft moss. Liam followed suit, sitting across from her as they shared a quiet moment of peace. The air felt alive with possibility, each moment more profound than the last. After a long silence, KLRA met his gaze, her eyes filled with an emotion Liam couldn't quite place. She spoke softly, almost as if she were talking to herself, her words a melody of her native tongue. Liam listened, captivated by the beauty of her language. Even if he couldn't understand it, he wished more than ever that he could know what she was saying. Sensing his desire to understand, KLRA reached out, her hand resting over her heart. KLRA, she said, her voice gentle, as she gazed at him, an invitation in her eyes. She then placed her hand on his chest over his heart. Liam. Her touch was warm, and he felt his heart quicken beneath her hand. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a depth that words could never express. It was an acknowledgement of their connection, a silent understanding that went beyond language and culture. Moved, Liam placed his hand over hers, his gaze meeting hers. "Thank you," he whispered, knowing she couldn't understand the words, but hoping the sentiment would reach her. She watched him, her eyes searching his, as though trying to read his soul. Their closeness lingered, the space between them charged with an intensity neither could deny. KLRA's gaze softened, and she slowly drew her hand back, her cheeks tinged with a faint silvery blush. Liam felt a tug of warmth in his chest, an emotion he hadn't anticipated, something far beyond mere admiration. KLRA turned her face away, as if needing a moment to gather herself. She busied her hands by arranging some nearby flowers, a subtle way to calm the emotions that were surfacing. For a warrior who had always maintained control, this feeling, this vulnerability, was unfamiliar and unnerving. But Liam saw her hesitation and felt an instinctive urge to comfort her. Without overthinking, he reached out and gently touched her shoulder. She turned to look at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. In that moment, all barriers seemed to dissolve between them. They sat close, the tension building in a quiet, powerful way. Liam was careful, moving slowly, waiting for her silent permission. When she didn't pull away, he felt a sense of encouragement. His hand brushed along her cheek, his touch gentle, exploring the softness of her skin. KLRA's breath hitched, her gaze holding his, the distance between them fading. Then, with a vulnerability that surprised even herself, she leaned into him, allowing him to wrap his arms around her. For the first time in her life, KLRA felt sheltered, as though the weight of her world could be lifted in the embrace of this outsider. They stayed like this, sharing a warmth and closeness that transcended their differences. KLRA's mind raced with questions and uncertainties, but in Liam's presence, they all seemed to melt away. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and comforting, and in that rhythm, she found a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. After what felt like hours, KLRA looked up at him, her gaze full of a silent, unspoken question. In response, Liam nodded, his eyes conveying a sense of commitment, a promise that he would honor whatever this connection meant for them. They stayed in each other's arms as the sun continued its slow journey across the sky. They knew that this moment, fragile as it was, would be the foundation for whatever came next. Neither knew what the future held, but in this shared embrace, they found a hope that transcended everything else.